Hello, my name is Andaya Sagayan. I am the director of Inspire Pennsylvania, and this is the voter registration and the history of voting lesson for high school aged students during the coronavirus. So, who we are. Inspire is a group that is nonpartisan, peer-led, and research-focused. What that means is we don't tell students the difference between the parties or who to vote for. We focus on making sure students understand the nuts and bolts of the political process so that they can participate more actively in the future. We want to create informed, confident, and empowered young people, and the way that we do that is by peer-to-peer outreach. Obviously, that's a little difficult during the coronavirus, but we know that when young people talk to each other about voting, they are more likely to get out and vote than if somebody tells them to do it. So what we want to do is we want to create a culture of voting at high schools, so more high school students feel like the voting process is accessible for them, and that they feel empowered to participate and become super voters in every election. Super voters are actually a real thing in the state of Pennsylvania. If you vote in 50 consecutive elections, which we have 2 elections a year, which would mean you vote in 25 consecutive years, you can get your name into the Voting Record Hall of Fame, which is a real thing in the state capital here in Pennsylvania. So we want to make sure that students are creating that habit early so that voting becomes easy, and it's really easy to become a Hall of Fame voter. So like we said, nonpartisan, peer-led, and research-focused. The research-focused part is we know that approximately 5 million people turn 18 each year, with 150,000 turning 18 in Pennsylvania before the 2020 general election. The 2016 election was decided by about 50,000 voters, so we know that young people are in an incredibly large and vital voting bloc to make sure that Pennsylvania has large population voting in every election, that our elected officials actually represent the people here in Pennsylvania. We also know that 50% of students don't directly go on to college after high school. They take jobs, they have gap years, they go into the military, they just don't go on to college. Because we're losing on so many young people that we can empower to vote, we want to focus on high school age students so that everybody has an opportunity to become a super voter. The other thing is that 1 out of 10 voters in this upcoming 2020 election will be Generation Z, will be our youngest generation of voters. Add that to the 3 out of 10 voters who are millennials, and we have a very large voting bloc that is young voters. And if we make voting a habit for young voters, then these people will vote in every election, and our elections will reflect the populations that vote for them. So that's why we want young people to participate actively in the election process and make voting a habit. So why vote? To talk about why we vote, we should talk a little bit first about the history of voting. I do have a more in-depth history of voting lesson that is accessible at tiny.cc /sign-up_inspire vote or Inspire Civics. And that's a way that you can get all 5 of the voter power lessons. But this one is about voter registration. So we're going to first talk about the history of voting. The first group of people who were able to vote in any election were only white men, land-owning, aged 21 and older. When our country was founded, more people couldn't vote than could. The idea was that we wanted to have a country that reflected the people that were living in it. But at the time, the people in power were the King of England, and to get power away from him, the white men were the ones that were able to take that power away from the King of England, form our country as we know it, and start the voting process. And it takes a little while before we start expanding voting rights. Pretty soon after 1776, we expand voting rights to all white men aged 21 and older. We get rid of the land owning part so that more people are able to vote, but it's still very, very limited on who gets a say in how our government is run. In the next group of people, to be able to vote was after the Civil War, was Black men and other men of color were granted the right to vote with the 15th Amendment in 1870. It took a long time, about 100 years, before we started changing our voting laws to start allowing more people to vote. After 1870, it was another long time before 1920 when women were granted the right to vote with the 19th Amendment. And then after that, we start expanding voting access a little bit more frequently. After that, we grant Native Americans citizenship and the right to vote with the Native American Citizenship Act, which again expands voting rights to more Americans. But there are still things like poll taxes and literacy tests and barriers from getting to the polls. So it takes all the way until the Civil Rights Movement to get the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act to remove some of the barriers that were put in place for people to vote, despite the fact that voting was legal for large populations at this time. After the Civil Rights Act, we lower the voting age to 18 with the 26th Amendment. That's why we can talk to high schoolers about voting today. 1971 was the middle of the Vietnam War, and 18-year-olds were drafted to go die for their country, but they could not vote for the people who sent them there. So the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age to 18, so more of our citizens had a chance to have a say on what happens to them in our government. And the last access to voting thing that we will talk about today is 1984. The Voting Accessibility Act required all polling places to be ADA accessible. So it took until about 1984 for more people in our country to be able to vote than can't, though there are still some people today that are ineligible to vote in elections. But at the time being, we have men, women of any race, over the age of 18 are able to make it to the polls and vote if they can, and if they don't have additional barriers to voting in their state. Now that we know how we got the vote, now let's talk about who we vote for. There are 3 levels of government and 3 branches of government. The way that the United States works is pretty disparate. We want to decentralize our power to make sure that no one person has control over our government. So the way that we do that is we split our government into a national level, we have state level governments, and we have local governments. And each of those governments have different powers and structures and things that they're allowed to do. And then in each level of government, we have 3 branches of government. The executive branch, whose job is to enforce the laws, which would be the president, governors, and mayors. We have the legislative branch, whose job is to write the laws, which would be the Senate and the House of Reps, your state house, your state Senate, or your city council. And then we have the judicial branch, which makes sure that the laws are adherent to our Constitution. And those are federal judges, state judges, and magistrates. In this graphic, federal judges are a different color. And the reason for that is we don't actually vote for our federal judges, though some states do vote for their state judges and magistrates. But at the federal level, the judges are appointed and not voted in. So it's even more important to vote for the president, the Senate, and the House of Representatives to make sure that federal judges fall in line with what we want to see when we go vote. At the state and local level, it's super important to go out to vote because these are the people that have impacts on your day-to-day lives. The President of the United States does not care whether potholes in Philly get filled, does not care what books you're using in your school. Those are things that your state and local government cares about and can help make changes in your day-to-day life in government. So when we're voting, we want to make sure that we're voting at every level and we're voting for every branch that we can. So what do we vote for? We know why, we know who, what do we vote for? At the national level, there are so many different voting issues. Same with the state level, and even in your school, there are hundreds and hundreds of issues that different people care about. This is just a small sampling because if I put any more on, it would overload the slide. But people vote on a variety of different topics, from climate change to minimum wage to school testing. All of these things are important to understand that your government has an effect on it. Government gets a bad rap. We always say that government is corrupt or overstepping, but in reality, the role of our government is to provide safety for us and security for us. Make sure that the food that we eat won't make us sick, to make sure that when we're in a crisis like coronavirus, we get the medical needs to get better. To make sure that people have access to food and water and shelter. These are the things that our government provides in some level for us. And it's important to know that different people care about different issues at different levels. When I talk to students, most young people will say that their biggest issues are things like climate change, gun safety, school testing, school lunches, minimum wage. All of these things are things that our young people care about a lot because they affect our young people in the day-to-day lives. However, older people will care more about things like taxes and social security, and these things that affect people as they age and get a little bit older. So it's important to have representation in government because young people and older people have different priorities. And making sure that people go out and vote makes sure that your priorities are the ones that we are voting for. We're not voting for people, we're voting for our issues. And if your issues are prioritized by a candidate, you're going to want that candidate to win. If your issues are not prioritized by a candidate, then somebody else is going to have those priorities and those issues. And it's a conflict, but that's why we go vote, because we're voting for the issues that we want to see turn into reality in our country. So why vote? Young people have the most potential power to impact elections. As I said before, 10% of voters will be Gen Z. 30% are millennials, which makes 40% of voters young voters. On the flip side, only 25% of voters are baby boomers, which is one of the older generations to vote. The thing is that young people don't vote as often as older people do, partially due to access to the polls and our busy young people lives. But it's also a habit. These older people have had a long time to form voting as part of a habit, and it's not as accessible for young people to go out and vote for their first time. We're trying to bridge that gap. So we want to make sure that more young people go out to vote. And it's super important because, not to be morbid, but the baby boomers don't have to live with the consequences of their vote as long as the younger generations do. And the thing is, 18 to 29-year-olds will make up the largest voting bloc of eligible voters. Some people say that their individual vote doesn't matter, or voting is, why bother with it? But you're not voting as an individual. You're voting with a voting bloc. You're voting with a group of people that agree with the same things that you agree with to a point, and disagree with the same things that you disagree with to a point. So when you're voting as part of a voting bloc, you have the opportunity to change and move elections. 150,000 people in Pennsylvania turn 18 each year. 50,000 people decided the 2016 election. So it is important that you go out and you vote as a part of your community and as part of a group. The other thing is individual votes do matter a lot more in local elections because a lot less people vote in those local elections, which is sad because those local elections are so important. So we want to make sure that people vote so that our issues and our voices are heard in government, and so that young people have a voice in the government that's supposed to represent them. 2/3 of eligible young voters don't vote because they say it doesn't make a difference. I love this comic because it shows how large the group of non-voters is. More people don't vote in elections than do vote. And if those people came out and voted, our political system would look a lot different than it looks today. So it's important to continue to go out and to vote because it can change the way our political system works. And when young people get involved, we get representation in government. The 116th Congress, which was the most recent Congress to be sworn in 2018, was the youngest and most diverse Congress that we've had ever. We have representation that reflects the way that we look as young people. And most movements in our country were started by young people. The civil rights movement started with students doing sit-ins in diners. Lowering the voting age was a thing entirely driven by 18-year-olds going off to die in a war that they couldn't vote for. And current political issues today, like climate change and gun control, are being headed by high school aged students and college age students. So when young people get involved, we change the way our government looks, and we change the way our government reflects us as citizens. So it's important for young people to go out and vote. So the upcoming election has been moved. The new Pennsylvania primary date is June 2nd, 2020. It's important to note that only 2 parties get to vote in the primaries in Pennsylvania. We have what's called a closed primary system, which means the Democrats can only vote for Democrats and the Republicans can only vote for Republicans, and anybody else can't vote. We've limited voting in our primaries to Democrats only voting for Democrats and Republicans only voting for Republicans. The thing is you can register to vote with any party. And if you want to register to vote as a Democrat or a Republican for the primary, you can. And then after the primary is over, it takes 3 clicks on the Department of State's website, votespa.com, to change your voter registration to reflect the party that you more agree with. So it's okay to change your party to be able to gain access to voting and change it later to reflect more closely what you believe in. So the Pennsylvania primary is June 2nd, 2020, and we are doing these lessons until the voter registration deadline of May 18th, 2020. That is the last day to register to vote, and we want to make sure as many students as possible get registered and participate in the upcoming primary election. It may not seem like the presidential candidates matter anymore, but those local elections still have primaries going on, and it's super important to turn out to vote, because if you don't turn out to vote, you're letting somebody else that did turn out make those decisions for you. So you want to turn out for the primary on June 2nd, 2020. The general election is on November 3rd, 2020, and this includes all parties, the Greens, the Libertarians, Independents. They all might be on the ballot. You'll be able to vote for anyone. Any voter registered as any party can vote for any candidate. You can go to vote411.org, which is the League of Women Voters website, about 3 weeks before the election, and make and fill out your ballot beforehand, and then take your handy dandy cell phone into the polling place, text the information to your cell phone, take it in with you to your polling place, and vote in the general election. You choose each person individually, so you can mix it up and choose whatever candidates you think will best represent you in government. Whatever candidates care more about your issues and will best represent those issues that you care about in government. And the last day to register to vote for the general election is October 17th. I keep talking about local elections because local elections are so important. You need to turn out for the primary and the general election, and you need to vote for everyone and everything on your ballot. Local elections and ballot initiatives are so, so important. Your mayor heads your city council, sets legislative agendas for the year. Your city council is the one that fills the potholes and makes sure that your schools are running smoothly. You can vote for sheriffs and court justices. You can vote for your own election board. The people that conduct your elections are in elected position themselves. They choose their voting machines and they make sure that your elections are conducted safely and fairly. The school board chooses your textbooks, gets taxes to make sure that your school looks nice and clean. They hire school employees and they regulate the activities that you do at your school. And there are so many ballot initiatives that are on the ballot, that happen on the ballots as well, which can raise or lower your taxes, can make constitutional amendments for the Pennsylvania Constitution and charter amendments for their city or county charter. These are legal documents that you get the opportunity to change. And these are, again, the things that affect the way that you live your day-to-day life. These are the people that you need to know so that you can make the change that you want to see in your town. How to vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'm going to tell you the nuts and bolts of how to get to the polls and how to fill out your ballot. So first thing you'll do is once you register to vote, in about 2 to 3 weeks, you will get a voter registration card in the mail. The envelope looks a little bit like this. This is a lovely example from Allegheny County, courtesy of the League of Women Voters. It'll have official election mail on it, but it sometimes looks a little bit like a bill. So keep your eye out for it. Make sure mom and dad don't throw it away, and make sure that you can get your voter registration card. On the inside, your card looks a little bit like this. It tells you where your polling place is, and this is a valid form of ID that you can take with you to vote in your polling place for the first time. If you lose your voter registration card, that's okay. You can go to votespa.com and find all of the information listed there. But the voter registration card is a really handy card to have to prove that, one, you are a voter, to remember what party you're registered as, and to know where your polling place is in every election. So when you're registering to vote, you want to register to vote at your current address. If you have more than one address, then you can choose which address you'll more likely be at on a Tuesday, which will make it easier for you to vote. You vote at your polling place listed on your voter registration card. You cannot vote at any other polling place. If you've lost your voter registration card, you can look up your polling place at votespa.com. If you move or temporarily live elsewhere, like you go to college or change your living situation within Pennsylvania, you can change your voter registration in just a few clicks at votespa.com. At the moment, it's better to register to vote at home because you'll likely be at home and not at school or someplace else on the June 2nd election day. And if you prefer, you can vote by mail with a mail-in ballot. The applications for mail-in ballots are also online at votespa.com. And if you vote by mail, your mail-in ballot must arrive at your local elections office by 8 p.m. on election day. That's why I recommend to make sure that your mail-in ballot is postmarked in the mail a week before the election day so that your vote is in the hot little hands of your election officials just in time to be counted on election day. If you do it any later, there's a chance that your ballot could get lost in the mail, and if it gets lost in the mail, then it means that your vote won't count. So make sure that if you're using a mail-in ballot, especially now with coronavirus, that you mail that ballot in sooner rather than later. If you go to your polling place, ID is required the first time you vote. You can use several forms of ID in Pennsylvania. Your voter registration card works great. Your driver's license or PA ID number is great as well. But a piece of mail with your name and your address on it works fine if you need to do that as well. You can fill out a sample ballot at vote411.org, which is the League of Women Voters website. It goes live about 3 weeks before an election. It's nonpartisan. They give surveys to all of the candidates and ballot initiatives. Those candidates return the surveys to the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters publishes them on their site with only edits for clarity here and there. And you can see exactly what these candidates believe in by going to vote411.org and make a good and informed choice on who you're voting for on election day. And again, those can get texted to your handy dandy cell phone that you can bring into the voting booth with you, so you know the names of the people that you already like and want to vote for without having to memorize them. Polling places are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on election day, again, June 2nd or November 3rd. If you are unsure how to fill out your ballot, you can ask for help or assistance. The first time I went to vote in Pennsylvania, I did not know how to submit my ballot. There was a button at the bottom of the machine that I just couldn't find. So I had to ask for help myself. And it's okay to ask for help because they'll tell you how to use the machine and they're not allowed to tell you to do anything else. It is strictly prohibited to discriminate or intimidate voters at polling places. If you feel like you're being discriminated or intimidated against, polling places are required to post voter protection hotline numbers in polling places. So you can call those voter protection hotlines, which is a group of lawyers whose job it is to sit around and troubleshoot election day problems, if you feel like you're being discriminated or intimidated against. And if for whatever reason you're being denied your right to vote, you believe you're at the correct polling place, you have a form of ID, and for whatever reason you're just not on the voter rolls, or they're saying that your ID is correct and is incorrect and you're unable to vote, request to fill out a provisional paper ballot. A provisional paper ballot is a ballot that is, after the election is over, an investigation will be done to determine whether or not your ballot actually counts. So don't worry if there's something goes wrong on election day, you can still fill out a provisional paper ballot, you can still vote in the election. How to register to vote. So we're registering to vote for the Governor's Civic Engagement Award. It's a super cool award that the Governor, the Department of State, the Department of Education have worked together to create. It is an award given to schools for registering a certain percentage of their students to vote. You can get the Gold Award for 85% of your eligible senior class registered. But if you can't reach 85%, 65% will earn you the Silver Award. You can also win an individual award if you as a student participate in voter registration drives at your school or through Inspire, Pennsylvania, and to serve as a poll worker on election day. If you're not going to be 18 by the election, don't worry, you can still work as a poll worker. The Department of State has created an Involved at 17 program, so you can call your local elections office and you should be able to work the polls even as a 17-year-old. Poll working is super cool because you can earn $145 for working at your local election office and making sure that people's votes are informed and fair. You get a training, you get free lunch, and you can help people use the voting machines and fill out their votes. It's better when young people do it because their voting machines in some counties are very similar to the Wawa machines, and young people are so much better with technology. We find it very intuitive, so you could be able to help your community better understand their voting machines and be able to vote. So we're doing this for the Governor's Civic Engagement Award, which again is super cool, and Inspire is partnering with schools and the GCEA to make sure that you can still win the Governor's Civic Engagement Award even as schools are closed during coronavirus. So at this point, students should go to inspiredpa.org/pledge and fill out this pledge to vote card. This pledge to vote card is for us to use to help make sure that we have an accurate count of your voter registration for your school so that you can win the Governor's Civic Engagement Award. But it also does a couple of other handy things as well. There are some parts of the form that are required, and those parts of the form are required because they help us with the Governor's Civic Engagement Award. The rest of the information is contact information. And the reason that we have the contact information there is that if you are ineligible to register to vote, I will send you an email on your 18th birthday as a birthday present from me to you with a voter registration form so that you can register to vote and vote in the upcoming elections when you are eligible. And if you fill out your contact information and are interested in getting involved with Inspire Pennsylvania, I would love to have you on my team as one of our inspired voters. And you can help your school create a culture of voting in your classes. And the last thing is, if you don't check that box, I'm not going to bug you about it. But the last thing is, if you put contact information, I will send you 3 texts before each upcoming election, reminding you that the election is coming up and giving you useful resources like the votespa.com or Votes411 website so that you can figure out where your polling place is, make a plan, and go and vote. Again, those contact information is optional, but I promise I will not sell your data and I will not spam you. It's just for me to make sure that you have someone reminding you, hey, the election is coming up. Have you made a plan to vote yet? But if you're not comfortable filling that out, please fill out the required portions, because if you're a student, we can help you get credit for participating in some of these classes, and you can help your school earn the Governor's Civic Engagement Award. So please fill out the asterisk portions, and the rest of it is optional. To register to vote, you must be a US citizen. You must be a resident of Pennsylvania for at least 30 days before the upcoming election, and you must be 18 years old or older on or before Election Day. Here's how you register to vote. First, in box 1, you're going to print your last name and then your first name. There's boxes that say junior, senior, second, third, and fourth. Those do not refer to your class as a junior or a senior, though congratulations if you are. Those refer to if you are Martin Luther King Jr. is when you would use those boxes. Your eligibility, if you can't check yes for both of the questions, then you are ineligible to vote. Otherwise, please check yes for both boxes. Do not lie on these forms. It's okay if you're ineligible to vote. You will be eligible eventually, and you will eventually be able to vote. For the moment, you have to be a citizen of the United States and check yes in that box, and you have to be 18 years old on or before Election Day and check that box. Your reason, if this is the first time you're registering to vote, it's new registration. You don't have to worry about any of the other boxes. The About You section, you have to put your birth date. You have to put whether you're male or female. Your race is optional. Your phone number and your email address are also optional, but I recommend putting them on your voter registration form, because that means if there's a problem with your voter registration form, the voter registration office can contact you. For whatever reason, they can't read it, or something didn't go through in the online form, that's how they will get in contact with you to let you know that something's gone wrong. When you put your address, you're gonna put your street address, the one that you live at most of the time, or the one that you'll be at on Tuesdays. It says you have to put your city, town. Municipality does not necessarily matter unless you live in Delaware County, but your municipality in Delaware County is akin to your SEPTA stops, so that's a good way to figure that one out. And it does say county at the bottom and not country. That one's something that gets confused all the time. So if you live in Philadelphia, it'll be Philadelphia County. If you live in Pittsburgh, it would be Allegheny County. If you live in State College, it would be Center County. If you receive mail at a different address, or would like to receive mail at a different address from where you live, you can put your mailing address in box 6. Second half of the form has your identification. Online, you can only use a pen.id or PA driver's license number, but on the paper forms, you can use the last 4 digits of your social security number. Do not check the box that says, I do not have a PA driver's license, pen.id, or a social security number. A lot of students don't read that one all the way through. You do have those cards. Not having them on you or not having the number handy does not mean that you do not have them. So please put either your driver's license or the last 4 digits of your social, and do not check that box. Political party, you can register as any party that you'd like, though I recommend if you want to participate in the Pennsylvania primary, you must check either Democrat or Republican. Other parties do not get to participate in the Pennsylvania primary. But again, it's super easy to change at a later date. 3 clicks on the Department of State's website. So you can vote as a Democrat or Republican in the June 2nd primary and change it later if you want to be something else. Voting assistance is only if you have a disability or need for some sort of accessibility when you vote. So for example, if you are blind, that would be an instance in which you need voting assistance, or if your primary language is not English, that's another reason that you could use voting assistance for your voter registration form. Your name or address should not have changed from your previous registration, because this should be the first time you're registering to vote, so you shouldn't have a previous registration. But if you do, fill out the information to the best of your ability. It's okay if you don't know all of the information offhand. And then at the end, you sign the declaration. It says that the information is true to the best of your knowledge and that you are legally qualified to vote. You sign or mark inside the box, print your name underneath, and put the date today. If you have any questions or have any concerns, you can follow us on social media. You can send me an email at india@inspirepa.org. You can send me a text message or give me a call at 717-347-6035. And we use the hashtag #InspireVotes on all social media sites. And if you tag us, I promise you will get a shout out, and I can give you a retweet or a little bit of love on social media. But if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love talking to people about voting. I would love to give you more resources to be able to do so. Thank you so much for participating in today's video. I thank you so much for being a registered voter, and make it to the polls on election day. Thanks.